G'day and welcome to the channel. My name is Matthew Dank. I'm a former Australian Navy and Air Force pilot and simulator flight instructor. And in this video, we're going to delve into pilot mental fitness and performance and why confidence matters, how we build confidence when taking on a new task. If you haven't caught my previous video, I touched on why I think mental fitness and mental performance for pilots is vital, why we need to spend time specifically on this topic. There's so much time, so much effort and money goes into preparing for and carrying out our flying training events and our actual flights in aircraft. We need to maximize those opportunities and make sure our preparation is top-notch all the way. So in this first video of the series, I'm going to delve into confidence, why it's something that can't necessarily be transferred from other parts of our lives or other aircraft types or other backgrounds, why it's something we need to build specifically for new challenges and new behaviors and skills we learn, and why we can embrace that process and get better and better at learning and performing in new areas. Now, this topic matters to me because I spent a 16-year career in the Australian military, going through Navy and Air Force training and operational roles on a range of different aircraft. I'm someone who struggled badly in my early career, in fact, failing everything in my second year at the Defence Academy and performing quite poorly indeed. So through a lot of introspection, through a lot of effort and application, I transformed my performance and really used that experience that I gained to mentor, coach, and lead others through their flying careers, both as a captain on Navy helicopters and Air Force heavy jets, and also as an instructor with a defense company, taking students through type ratings and taking students through captain upgrades and other specific qualifications on the C-17. I'm passionate about this stuff. I think it makes a massive difference to not just how we perform, but how we enjoy our lives and our performances and careers on aircraft types. So I'm really pleased to be bringing this through to you today. Okay, I want to kick off now with a story about my early days on the C-17 back in 2016 and 2017, how I struggled badly with the aircraft and my confidence, and how I transformed this and what set me up for a lot of success later on in my flying career. Okay, so in 2017, I was conducting a category upgrade check, so really a flight test on the C-17 where I was a DCAT co-pilot or first officer, so not fully trained on the aircraft type, but just off of my simulator training. And I was needing to be upgraded to a CCAT co-pilot so I could act as a proficient crew member. So this is one of the first check rides that is conducted on the C-17 for new pilots. My background prior to then was as a Navy helicopter pilot. I spent about 10 years on Navy helicopters, including a recent deployment to the Middle East for a 7-month period, and I'd come back and been successful to move across to Air Force. Not a lot of fixed wing experience, just my training with Air Force on smaller aircraft types. And importantly, I'd just come off of a simulator training phase with contractors who, funnily enough, hadn't actually flown the C-17 themselves. Very few actually had first-hand experience with the aircraft type, so the level of training and quality there probably wasn't what it could have been. And for that reason, and that's part of the reason I was struggling a little bit at this point in time. So just prior to this flight, I'd been at the squadron for 2 weeks, and I'd only conducted 1 takeoff and 1 landing in that period. In the 2 weeks prior to that, I conducted 3 takeoff and landings. So that's very low experience, very low recency in terms of recent flight events compared to my background. Certainly in flying training, I was conducting takeoff and landings every day, and in helicopter aviation, I was flying 4 or 5 times a week, and I was conducting multiple takeoff and landings typically on each day. So a lot of practice, a lot of exposure, and a lot of ability to learn just through repetition. However, in the back of my head, I knew or assumed that the Air Force and my flying supervisors were aware of this, and I assumed that the training I'd received on the simulator had set me up for success, although at some level I was doubting this. So the flight in question was from Travis Air Force Base in Northern California through to Honolulu Airport in Hawaii. Leading up to this flight, I'd been flying with a qualified captain and qualified flying instructor, and another more senior co-pilot or first officer going through his category upgrade training. For that reason, the flight and the mission up until then into the US and Canada was really focused on this other pilot getting them up to the standard, and I wasn't getting a lot of experience or a lot of flying practice. On this particular leg out of Travis, Northern California, I'd taken off. I'd actually messed up part of the departure procedure by getting my acceleration heights and my acceleration procedure wrong. And that was quickly corrected by the instructor, and that was going to be a debrief point for that flight. So the flight was about 4 hours through to Honolulu I'd been in the cruise thinking about my approach, how I was going to carry that out, how I was going to slow down the aircraft and configure and all the rest of it that we plan for and we do when we're arriving in an airport. However, when it came time to put things into practice, things didn't go to plan. I'd come out of a very quiet environment, in fact, in the cruise with very little happening and a very low state of arousal or readiness, to an environment where I've got air traffic control talking to me. There's lots of different voices from different nations, there's accents, different radio procedures, and a brand new aircraft and airport. Given I had some fairly low experience leading up to that point, I was certainly on edge. I could feel my nerves and I could feel my anticipation of what was coming up. On descent, I was calling for approach checklists and I was slowing and configuring the aircraft, but all the while I could feel that I was having to work very, very hard just to keep track of what the aircraft was doing and how I was controlling the aircraft. In general terms, I was behind the aircraft, not keeping up with what was happening. Late in the approach, we came in from the east towards the west. We were expecting radar vectors and a right turn onto final for runway 8, and I was just really struggling to manipulate the aircraft using the automatic flight control panel. This is something we didn't have in helicopters. The Seahawk is relatively basic in autopilot terms. It's really a stick and rudder or stick and collective aircraft where it's hands-on the majority of the time, and this was something new to me, using this panel and having to manipulate it using fairly small switches, knobs, and readouts. So we received a radar vector to turn onto final. We'd done that. I'd armed the localizer. The aircraft had intercepted the localizer final for the ILS approach, and I could just feel that my awareness was diminishing. I was really starting to tunnel in and fixate on landing that aircraft and finding the right runway to land on. When we approached almost the glide path ready for descent for the runway at Pearl Harbor, and I just snapped. I disconnected autopilot, auto throttle, I'd lowered the nose and pointed at a runway that I saw, fixated on landing and getting in and putting the aircraft on the ground. Problem was, it was the wrong runway. I had a snap and focus on the wrong airport. I'd made a snap decision and focused in on the wrong airport and the wrong runway, and I was descending the aircraft, getting ready to land on that. So within a few seconds, the instructor took over, re-established the flight path, re-engaged automation, and he was in control of the airplane, and we continued forward. Within a few seconds, I'd gained my situational awareness. I was back with the aircraft, back with the plan, and we taxied the aircraft in, shut down without any further incidents. So this, as you can imagine, was a major fail. It was a big hit to myself. It was a big impediment on my moving forward, and there were many lessons to learn, but most of them didn't relate to how I performed in the aircraft. They were about my preparation and, importantly, my mindset and my attitude going into that particular flight. So following this incident coming into Pearl Harbor in Hawaii as a new low experience first officer or co-pilot, we got back to Australia. I had a debrief with my instructor at the time, and he said something very pivotal to me. He said, "Matt, you need to own this. This is on you. You have to own this, you." That really, really struck a chord. Going into that debrief with the instructor, there was a little story in the back of my mind, a little semblance saying, well, you didn't have much experience, you didn't have much recency, and you weren't really set up for success by the simulator instructor situation, with many of those instructors not having any C-17 experience. Something in the back of my mind wanted to allocate blame to other parties. Wanted to go easy on myself. But from that briefing forward, it was clear that there was no room for that. That only owning my preparation, my performance on that day was going to set me up for future successes. So in the days and the 2 or 3 weeks after that flight, I methodically broke down my performance, did some soul searching, did the hard yards to really look inside myself and how I prepared and performed on that day, and made a major transformation that really served me extremely well for the rest of my time on C-17s. And this approach allowed me to bring confidence in terms of very rigorous preparation and in terms of being ready for any challenge that I faced in the future that served me extremely well. There were 4 things that I brought out of that experience, 4 things that I developed, that I honed from my previous experience that set me up for great success moving forward from them. Now, the first thing was detailed and thorough preparation. So many of us are aware just how much information there is to be across when going through a new training evolution or picking up a new qualification in aircraft. You might be going from a visual pilot into an instrument pilot. You might be going onto a more complex and advanced aircraft type that's much faster, or you might be going for a captain upgrade where you're jumping in the left seat You're having to take leadership for decision making. You have to lead the crew and taking responsibility for decision making for that flight and that aircraft. Each of these comes with new skills, new knowledge, and new attitudes and behaviors we need to display to successfully carry out the task or carry out the flight. So the first point was just being very thorough and very detailed, almost over preparing for the phases of the flight or assessment that was coming up. Now the test as to how well I've done this was whether I could talk through and recall from memory all the details I needed to then perform in the aircraft. So if I couldn't remember it, couldn't recall it, couldn't discuss it accurately at any point in time, I clearly couldn't do so when I stepped in the aircraft in the pilot's seat. For the particular flight into Honolulu, that was things like automatic flight control panel manipulation. What controls, what switches, what buttons was I manipulating at what point in time for the approach? It was the general approach procedure, decelerating the aircraft, configuring with flaps, calling for checklists, radio calls, arming localizers, arming glide slopes, everything along with the approach itself. And the third piece for me was the instrument approach procedure. So flying an ILS on a non-standard instrument approach chart or plate into a new airport, being familiarized and being more confident with those plates and those charts for those areas I was going into. So just three things: being detailed, being thorough, and being fully up to speed and full bottle on that before stepping into the aircraft. The second thing was deliberate practice. This is something I first heard of through listening to Tiger Woods about 15 years ago. Deliberate practice. This is practicing not by just going through the method, going through a sequence or going through some sort of routine, but it's deliberately targeting that practice in areas where we are weak. So going from my experience going into Pearl Harbor, losing situational awareness, losing the ability to fly the aircraft, there were certain things that I could break down and I could point to that I needed to pick up my game. And I just touched on three of those. The other two factors that I didn't touch on were rehearsals and chair flying or visualization. I talked about how my recency and my experience leading up to this arrival into Honolulu was fairly low. I'd only flown one takeoff and landing in the 2 weeks prior. What I hadn't done was supplement that or replace that lack of experience with a lot of visualization, a lot of chair flying. Bringing this in the future served me extremely well and almost substitutes for experience in the aircraft itself. And the other piece there, probably more important than anything, was my mindset, behavior, and attitude going into the particular flight. So I was aware that I wasn't receiving a lot of experience, a lot of practice, and a lot of takeoff and landings prior to this particular flight. And I was also well aware that the training provided during my simulator conversion wasn't top tier. And my view was that this was an accepted standard by Air Force. Even though I knew this wasn't entirely true, at some level I believed that, and I used that as an excuse as to why I didn't need to prepare to the highest degree, why I could rely on my previous experience in Navy helicopter operations, why close enough was going to be good enough, and none of that was true. So being really deliberate about my performance and my preparation enabled me to target my skills, my knowledge, and really my attitude, behaviors leading up to that particular event. The third thing I locked in was seeking feedback. Now, we should all know that feedback is essential for improving our learning through our careers. But what happened after this particular flight is that I got much, much more focused. My attention to detail became razor sharp on anything that I was missing out on, any performance problems I had, and fixing them as fast as I possibly could by recording them, whether that was in a book or in my phone in a note app, and deliberately going after those things and targeting them so I could fix them as soon as I possibly could. No gaps, no oversights. And the fourth thing that really allowed me to build confidence moving forward was just accepting and embracing the grind. Acknowledging and accepting that anything new that is difficult is going to take a lot of effort, it's going to cause a sense of struggle, a sense of grind, and it's going to be a hard slog. The more effectively I can move through that, or the more effectively I could target effort at getting through that process, the better I would come out and the faster I would come out the other side as a comfortable, confident pilot. All right, that's the video for today about how I built bulletproof confidence to prepare for and take on any future task. I've really shared a difficult moment in my flying career in C-17s and also how I overcame that and within 2 years was performing at a much, much higher level as an aircraft captain on a wide-bodied heavy jet. Those things, as we touched on, were very thorough and detailed preparation, such that I could recall anything I needed to from memory before stepping into the aircraft. Deliberate practice, really focusing on the weak points that I needed to improve to lift my game overall. Seeking feedback and actually really embracing feedback, taking it from anywhere I can get it and considering how to lift my... Proactively seeking feedback, going after feedback on my performance and incorporating those fixes as quick as I possibly can. And lastly, embracing the grind, embracing the struggle, knowing that the hard churn of getting through a new skill and building out that neural pathway takes time, takes repetition. Knowing that that is worth it, that is worth the effort. The more effort and focus I put into it, the faster I get through, the better I perform afterwards. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've taken something away from my personal struggles and my story of success and how I came to build really bulletproof confidence through this process. I'd love to hear about your personal journeys and your stories about overcoming your struggles, how you build confidence and how that served you in your flying careers or other areas of your life. If you've got some stories to share, please comment below. Otherwise, feel free to share this video with someone who could do with hearing it. Give me a thumbs up, and I look forward to catching you in a new video very soon.